Hey there, everybody. This is me, Patrick, PatPaj, and I'm coming at you with a podcast that I'm going to be starting. I haven't been on the web that much recently. My last YouTube video has been like 3 months now. Just had a new job and everything, so just trying to adjust to that schedule. And the job is very fast paced, and the hours are really wonky. So, I kind of miss the web, talking to people on Instagram, YouTube, that type of stuff, making videos. So I decided to, hop on. I'm going to try to make a podcast just talking about MMA, boxing, fighting in general, even just whatever is on my mind. I feel like it's going to be pretty fun. And what I thought would be a good starting point would just be to go over UFC 226, just because that just passed by and it was a pretty big event. And we got another double champion, two weight division simultaneously champion. So I'm going to try my best to cut out the O's and Ahs and make sure there's no awkward pauses or anything like that. But there's never going to be a perfect time but the present, so might as well get this out right now and then I'll improve it as we go. So UFC 226 was a pretty good card. Even on paper, it was pretty stacked, and I was actually pretty excited. And funny story, me and my friend who is from Bolivia, we actually made a bet, $20 bet, that 9 of the fighters on the card, if they won, then they would have, if all 9 fighters won, then we would have got a payout for the bet for $2,400, which is insane considering how small our bet was, our entry bet. But this is MMA, so you're basically playing with the lottery when you try to pick out the fighters. So that's just a lesson that I had to learn the hard way with $10. All right, so I'm just gonna try to break down all the fights as the starting with and only the fights that I actually cared to watch and the ones that I thought were interesting enough. I'm gonna start with the first fight, Dan Hooker versus Gilbert Burns. So I actually really like this fight because Dan Hooker, his record doesn't reflect just how good of a fighter he is. And Gilbert Burns, I believe his record is something like 8 wins, 1 loss coming into this fight. And what we had was a decent enough counter striker versus a brawler who is really good on the ground. Gilbert Burns, he's a killer on the ground. But going into the fight, right away, what we saw was landing was the kicks from both of these fighters, especially Gilbert Burns, just because what we noticed right away was that the kicks were landing for both of these fighters, but Gilbert Burns looked like he was going to them more frequently, and he was actually off-balancing Dan Hooker and was kind of kicking him out of his stance. Dan Hooker actually started throwing kicks back, but it was actually when he was trying mid-kick to try to kick Gilbert Burns that Gilbert Burns actually caught him with an overhand right. And this actually it looked like it actually woke up Dan Hooker, because after that moment, he looked spot on with his striking. He was coming in with a non-committal jab and kind of feinting the jab as well, getting Gilbert to throw punches that were going to miss, because Gilbert is the type of guy who loves to get into a brawl. Gilbert is the type of person to get into a brawl, so what he'll do is that any chance he gets to start trading with his opponent, he'll take it. The thing is that Dan Hooker, by showing a jab and not actually committing to it 100% of the times, he would get Gilbert's timing off. So Dan would step in for a jab, not actually throw the jab, or he would throw a jab but not commit his way to it. Gilbert would jump on the opportunity, start swing and nothing in air, and then all of a sudden he would eat another 1 or 2 shots, like an actual punch. Gilbert actually gets knocked down by a counter right straight from Dan Hooker on the inside of an overhand right, gets dropped. Dan Hooker jumps on a guillotine, but he abandons the attempt within a couple seconds because he would rather not be on the ground with Gilbert. Gets up, then they go back to the feet, and again, it's the exact same thing. Dan Hooker starts getting the better exchanges, and I really like the ending combo. What it was is that Gilbert was backed up against the fence. Dan Hooker comes up, throws a left hook to the body, and follows it with a left hook to the head. And the reason why I like this a lot is just because what you usually see is when fighters are pressed up against the cage, you'll see a lot of people headhunting. They'll start going for the head and throwing punches as much as they can toward the opponent's head. The thing is that when an opponent is hurt, they have a good chance of just moving their head and getting out of the way of danger. But by throwing to the body instead, your body can't duck and weave like your head can. So it's just a free power shot to the body. And Dan Hooker went to it, got the body shot, went up to the head, actually clips Gilbert as Gilbert tries to throw his own left hook. The only difference is that Gilbert, he's moving away from Dan Hooker, so his left hook is coming kind of at an awkward angle, as well as he doesn't land the connection just as flush as Dan Hooker, so he gets knocked down. Dan comes in, finishes Gilbert. Nice win under Dan's belt. That was one of the good fights on the card. The next fight that I watched was Lando Venata versus Drukor Klose. And this fight, what you gotta know about Lando Venata is that he's almost a right-sided. Lando Fanata's main offense comes from his right hand. The problem with that is that it's the same problem that Roy Nelson had. As soon as the opponent understands that they just have to avoid the right hand, you're a one-noted threat. And it could be as something as simple as us circling to your opponent's left side, so their left hand, and makes it that much more harder for you to land the right hand. And what we actually saw was Lando struggling to land the right hand, because what he usually likes to do is that he likes to get people leading so he can counter with the right hand, just because it's easier to counter than to lead. And what Jakor, I can't remember how you say his name, what he would actually do is that anytime Lando would start coming forward, he would just start backpedaling, start hopping backwards into the space in the octagon, and Lando Venata would end up either just barely able to touch him with the right hand or not be able to catch him at all, because Lando did not try to press or pressure Jakor to the fence at all. And that's one of the main keys to power hitting, is actually placing your opponent against the fence, pressuring them to the fence, so that way they actually have no way to move. That's the biggest issue when it comes to striking, is that anytime you show your opponent something, the best thing they can do to stop your technique is just go backwards. And they're creating distance between you and themselves and you. So by placing them on the fence, they don't have anything to go backwards into, and you can just start teeing off with power shots. The thing is that Lando, he isn't a great cage cutter, so he would either try to lure Jakor by inviting him so he can try countering, but Jakor being like a level-headed guy, he never committed to anything to actually get countered, as well as anytime he chased Jakor would just back up and just back up into the distance, and he could start circling out and there would be no threat at the right hand. Another two things that Jakor did really well is that anytime he did step into exchange, Jakor would just enter into the clinch, nullifying Lando's right hand, and then rough him up in the clinch. It seemed like Lando had a lot of trouble inside the clinch, and Jakor was landing knees to the stomach, some elbows as well, and roughing up Lando. The thing is that when you're chest to chest with somebody, punching really isn't an option, because you need that momentum from your hips and the space so your hands can travel that distance. Jakor was doing the right thing by folding over his elbows, because you don't need that much distance for your elbows to do a lot of damage. Another thing is that Jakor, he did something which DC actually did later on in the night with Stipe Miocic, was that anytime Lando would throw the right hand, Jakor would make sure that he had his left hand up and trying to either push Lando's right hand by the shoulder or even go over the shoulder. So what Jakor would actually do is he would stiff arm Lando's right shoulder, or at least try to place his hand over Lando's right shoulder. And what this actually does is lift Jakor's left shoulder up, protecting him from the right hand. If you actually rewatch the fight, you'll see a lot that Lando's right hand ends up clipping Jakor over the back or over his left shoulder, causing no damage at all. Jakor was also hitting a bunch of leg kicks, and it forced Lando to switch to southpaw. The thing is that Jakor was actually quicker to the body kick, the open guard, that's what it's called when a southpaw versus an orthodox fighter. Open guard body kick, and it was a pick your poison type of situation for Lando. You'd either get leg kicked or body kicked, depending on what stance he had. So Lando ended up losing the fight, and it's kind of sucks, because Lando is he is a very exciting fighter. I don't know if the UFC is going to cut him off or not, but still want to see him in the UFC. Maybe place him against a lower tier guy, as well as Jakor Close did a very good job. So the next fight that I watched was Rafael Assunção versus Rob Font. This fight was a classic Rafael fight, just right outside Rob Font's range, clipping him with counter strikes and picking him off by leg kicks from the distance. Whenever he did see an opportunity to score a takedown, he would score the takedown. Just really great top control. One thing to note was that Rafael was very handsy in this fight, because Rob Font was the taller fighter. He came in like 6 inches taller, something ridiculous, as well as like a 6-inch reach advantage. So Rafael actually made sure that his hands were palms out, reaching for the jabs and everything, palming the jabs and the straight punches from Rob, disrupting the flow, kind of like a George Foreman style of fighting. And one thing to know is that Rob Font, he had the right idea. What he was trying to do was close the distance with a double jab, and with a double jab, the goal isn't actually to land your jabs. It's actually to move in safely within your opponent's range. That way you can get closer to actually land a real jab or a right-handed blow or something along those lines. The thing is that Rafa would double jab, Rafael would back up, you get very near the fence, but Rafa never capitalized on that. Instead of pressuring Rafael to the fence, what would happen is that he would either lay back, let Rafael circle off the fence, or he would just not commit to an attack to actually punish Rafael for getting to the fence. And Rafael just circle to the open, just stay out of his range and pick him off with counter strikes and kicks. The next fight that I have is Uriah Hall versus Paulo Costa. Bro, Paulo Costa, this man, there's no way that you can look at him and tell me that he's not on steroids. This guy looks like he's sculpted by Zeus himself. Got a real Yo Romero situation going on here. But getting into the fight, Uriah Hall actually looked really good in this fight. He was actually using his jab pretty effectively, actually hitting Costa with it. Pretty solid jabs. Costa came in fouling though, he kicked Uriah right in the cup, poked his eyes a bunch of times, and he actually ended up kicked Uriah Hall like 3 times. He actually hit him 3 times in the cup, as well as poked him once in the eye. The ref gave him a warning, but I mean, after 4 fouls just in a row like that, he should have deducted a point rather than just like giving Paulo a warning. But what really highlighted in this fight was, even though Uriah Hall looked really good in this fight, it really highlighted the problems that he's had his whole career. One is that he's a very left-sided fighter. What you see from him is a left high kick, a right back kick, a jab, and a left hook. All of those are coming from the left side, and all your opponent has to do if you're just attacking from the left side is circle away from that, and it makes your job twice as hard to hit him. And anytime that Uriah did throw the right hand, it was this really awkward step off right hand where he would throw it, turn his whole back, and step off to the left, kind of like he was too scared to actually commit to it. And that's very limiting for Uriah, obviously. What we saw Paulo do was actually, all he was trying to do was pressure Uriah until he got into range to land those bombs. He was actually hitting Uriah really, really hard. Pretty intense, actually. Both these fighters actually have the exact same problem, is that when they do jab, their heads are just stiff in the air, non-moving, and their hands are not helping them like disguise their blows or help block other jabs. Whenever they did jab off, they would hit each other because their heads weren't moving after the jab, because usually good boxers, what they'll do is that when they jab, they already have their head moving to the sides or changing levels and stuff like that. And these guys were just trading jabs. Paulo was moving into Uriah's range, and Uriah has a longer reach than Paulo. He was getting better off in the exchanges. But in the second round, Paulo switched up his strategy and started jabbing to the body as well. So not every single jab was just a jab off that Uriah Hall could win just because of reach. Because Paulo was starting to jab to the body, a lot of Uriah's jabs actually flew above Paulo's head and past him over his shoulders. So he started getting the edge on the jab offs. And another thing that Paulo was actually doing that I really liked was body work. He was always constantly trying to hit Uriah in the body, which is something that I love to see any fighter do. And the end actually came off a counter left uppercut, I believe. He nailed Uriah with the uppercut. You could see the wind leave Uriah's body. He starts backing up. He gets pressed against the fence, and then Paulo just starts dropping these bombs on him. And I mean, like, those looked like it really, really hurt. And it wasn't that he was attacking the head. He was also going to the body along the cage, which is amazing. He starts going to the head. Uriah Hall drop. There's a finish for Paulo Costa. I mean, this guy, the real opponent that he's been beating, the real victories is that he keeps on passing the USADA drug tests, but, you know, he has a lot of potential as a talent. It looks like he listens to his coach. In the first round, he was just jabbing off with somebody who had a longer jab than him, but in the second round, he realized that he had to switch levels to like start getting in on the jab. So smart break kid, just hopefully he keeps on passing these tests. The next fight that we got is Paul Felder versus Mike Perry. I really like this fight. I actually thought Paul Felder did enough in the end to get the decision. I'm not mad that Mike Perry won. It was an amazing fight. One thing is that Paul Felder, he is an enormous lightweight. Like, he looks enormous when he's fighting other lightweights. And when I saw him next to Mike Perry, he actually looked about the same size or even bigger than Mike Perry just by a bit. So I was just thinking, like, Paul Felder could actually do decently enough in the welterweight division or lightweight division, whatever he chooses, because he is massive. So what you saw was that Paul Felder actually played the outfighter, point fighter, trying to pick off at Mike Perry from the outside with push kicks and jabs. And anytime that Mike Perry tried to to step in on him, he tried to meet him with a counter knee or a counter elbow. The thing is that Paul Felder ended up breaking his arm trying to counter with a spinning elbow where he hit top of Mike Perry's head wrong with his arm and actually broke his right arm. So he was actually having trouble in the clinches and throwing that right arm. But Paul Felder is tough as fuck because he still managed to throw that right hand a decent amount of times throughout the fight, even though it was clearly broken. And this actually, I really like this because this actually happened. This is something similar that happened in the Yoel Romero and Robert Whittaker fight that happened not too long ago. Robert Whittaker broke his right hand, but his corner kept on asking him to throw the right hand. The reason why you want to make it look like at least you're trying to land whatever hand is broken or whatever part of your body is broken is because you don't want your opponent to know that they're up an advantage on a limb. Let's say that Mike Perry started noticing. I don't think Mike Perry actually noticed that Paul Felder was injured, but let's say that Mike Perry did notice that. So what he started doing was that, oh, Paul Felder's right arm is broken. You know what I'll do? I'll just start throwing up a left high kick into that side or just jabbing constantly because he has nothing to defend himself with or counter with, and it could have been an easy win. But Paul Felder stuck to it, threw the right hand a bunch of times to make it seem like he was still using it. Mike Perry never caught on. And I thought in round 1 and 3, and even like 90% of round 2, Paul Felder did a really good job of keeping Mike off of him. In the clinch, they're pretty evenly matched, and every time Mike Perry stepped in, he would get countered with switch knees and elbows. But what I think won him the fight was that last little flurry at the end of round 2. He slips on the inside, throws a left uppercut / hook hybrid, lands on Paul's head, cuts him open. He starts bleeding everywhere. He starts teeing off on him, grabs a body lock, goes for the suplex, tries the suplex. Paul Felder lands on his own head. And I don't know if you ever tried to suplex anybody, but I've tried it. And when they land on your own head, it rocks you. It feels like you just got dropped on your head, not the other person got dropped on his head. And he ended that round with the flurry. And I think that's why I actually won him the fight. Paul Felder, amazing. Mike Perry, amazing performance. Can't wait to see what's next for both of them. Next fight, Gokhan Saki versus Khalil Rountree Jr. This one, a lot of hype going behind Gokhan Saki. I actually thought that he might be able to win, but it was really simple. Gokhan threw a kick and it was naked with no setup, and he threw it from southpaw. Khalil stepped on it, threw a left straight down the middle. As soon as Gokhan fell down, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to scramble or get up and TKO there. So that was like really quick, 1 minute. Nothing really to talk about there. Michael Chiesa versus Anthony Pettis though was an amazing fight. I really liked that. I thought Anthony Pettis had a really good chance coming in against Michael Chiesa, just because Michael Chiesa is a very tall, lanky guy, and if you've ever watched Anthony Pettis fight Donald Cerrone, I thought it would be the same type of situation. Body kicks into the long torso, making it really easy to hit the body. And what we saw was that Michael Chiesa, he's a really big lightweight. He actually missed weight. What he did was that he pressured Anthony to the fence, went for the takedown, got a couple takedowns, threatened a arm triangle. Anthony Pettis managed to scoot into half guard, managed from half guard to stand up. Actually a little scary moment where he plants his hand on the ground trying to get out half guard so he can tripod up, and his hand is out, and Michael Chiesa could have grabbed that and actually went for an armbar, but he doesn't grab it. Gets pressed against the fence again. This time gets threatened with a Kimura, gets tripped, gets back up. This is where Anthony Pettis starts taking over. See, the thing about Anthony Pettis is that he is half the fighter when he is backing up because he's such a strong kicker. And by pressing him up against, pressuring him to the cage, you're doing the right thing. But once you get him to the cage, it's not enough just to lean on him and maybe try to score a takedown. We saw this in the Gilbert Melendez fight where he pressed Anthony against the cage, but he just stood there. And you're not going to tire out Anthony from just pressing him up against the cage and trying to go for some weak takedowns. You actually have to do what RDA did. What RDA was doing is he was beating Anthony up against the cage, beating him up, throwing kicks, throwing punches to the body. Every time that Anthony tried to throw back, he would take him down, start beating him up the ground. Anthony Pettis would try to work his way back up, get back up. He'd get hit on the way back up, and as soon as he starts throwing again, he'd get taken back down, and it was an exhausting 5-round fight against RDA. Michael Chiesa and Gilbert Melendez, all they did was try to pressure him, push him against the cage, and stall out almost, and just try to work for takedowns, which is never going to work against Anthony Pettis because, this guy, he's a world-class fighter. You're not going to tire him out that way. You're not going to threaten him that way. He's going to feel comfortable. And during the whole fight, he did feel comfortable. And out in range, it was all Anthony Pettis, sniping him with the body kicks, the straights down the middle. actually ends the fight by throwing a body kick. Michael Chiesa tries to play it off, tries to throw his own body kick, but gets sniped by a right straight by Anthony Pettis right down the middle, drops him. Anthony Pettis goes for the guillotine, an arming guillotine. He can't quite get it, recovers his guard. He rolls for an armbar, can't get it. Michael Chiesa defends it, but Michael Chiesa accidentally leaves leg over his shoulder. Anthony Pettis goes for the high guard, grabs the triangle, locks it in, underhooks his leg, finishes the triangle, pulls in Chiesa's arm, bends it, gets the armbar triangle, finishes him off. Great win for Anthony Pettis, puts him back in the win column, puts Michael Chiesa in a really weird place where this is his second loss in a row, as well as he came in overweight for his last fight, so he might have to move up in the welterweight where he might not have the advantage of being the bigger guy, as well as Anthony Pettis. This guy, he's a natural lightweight. He can make the cut to featherweight, but he chooses to fight lightweight. That's the weight that he feels more comfortable at, and he's still sniping, taking numbers. So I love that. So Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. This one I won't spend too much time on. Everybody was really hyped about this. They thought that this was going to be a fight that was going to end in the first round. Somebody was going to get knocked out. But what it really showed was that Francis Ngannou is very limited in his striking. He's a good counter puncher, and he loves it when people are punching at him. He's not a good boxer, and he's not necessarily even a good counter puncher. He just has a pretty few good counters that he goes to, like the lean away left hook and uppercut and stuff like that. And what Derek Lewis showed is that Derek Lewis very rarely in this fight threw any punches, but he was leading with kicks and using kicks a lot. And two things, because they were like jumping kicks and Francis Ngannou had to brace for them, he really didn't have time to counter, as well as when he did try to counter, because these kicks were so long, Derek Lewis wouldn't be in punching range, he would be in kicking range, and Francis Ngannou was looking to counter with his hands, but he wouldn't be able to reach Derek, so there's nothing he can do. And what he saw was a lot of waiting, because neither of these fighters wanted to lead, because Derek Lewis knew that leading and trying to get into a boxing match or like throwing punches with Francis would be a bad idea, because you'd get countered. And Francis Ngannou, he can't lead, he doesn't know how to pressure to the fence or try to set up his punches. All he knows is that when the opponent comes to me, I gotta start swinging my hands real fast and I'll get the knockout, because he does have the power. And the other thing is that he can't get his opponent to lead. He doesn't know how to like Anderson Silva was a really good example of this. He can get people trying to throw punches at him, chasing Anderson and leaving themselves open for the counter, but Francis Ngannou doesn't have that type of he's just not a good striker. That's the thing. So every time Derek Lewis did try to throw punches, what he would do is that he would throw a punch, and as soon as Ngannou started countering, Derek Lewis was already changing levels, hitting the clinch or a takedown, and holding onto the clinch or just breaking off a clinch. And that also nullifies a counter puncher, because their hands are tied up, and even if they can get a hand free, they can't really get that momentum with their hips and distance that they need from their hands to get those knockouts. So in all honesty, Derek Lewis, he's probably the one that deserves the heavyweight title shot, not Brock Lesnar. Or if anything, the UFC could put him up against Stipe, or maybe he could fight Curtis Blades, or Curtis Blades fight Stipe, whatever. But yeah, Francis Ngannou, he really has to work on either learning how to lead and pressuring people against the fence so he can get them to panic and try to swing at him so he can counter, or getting people to lead against him so he has the opportunity to counter. Now finally, the big daddy fight that everybody was waiting for, DC versus Stipe Miocic, the super fight, light heavyweight versus heavyweight. This was such an amazing fight. I really liked it. It kind of cemented DC as one of the greats of all time in MMA, as well as the best light heavyweight in MMA so far. I know a lot of people make the argument that John Jones beat him once without the steroids and once with the steroids. The thing is that DC has faced higher level competition throughout his career than actually John Jones. The argument that I would make is that John Jones, the highest level of competition that he's faced is Lyoto Machida, Ryan Bader, DC, Alexander Gustafsson, and that's it. Those are the four biggest fights on his career. Those are the four biggest highlights. And DC, he's got Alexander Gustafsson, Volkan Ozdemir, Stipe Miocic. He has Roy Nelson on there. He has Josh Barnett, which is crazy. He has Anthony Joshua twice. He's fought John Jones twice. And the second fight, he looked really good against John Jones. And John Jones obviously got caught doping. So DC, to me, greatest light heavyweight of all time. Easily the most skilled and one of the greats of MMA. Very humble dude. But getting into the fight. So the fight starts with Stipe. He's the bigger man. So obviously he is pressuring DC. But DC... So Stipe's main weapons are his jabs as well as his right straight. In DC, he had his defenses against both these both these techniques was amazing. So first of all, DC came out and he was using the George Foreman style of fighting with his palms out, ready to deflect any straight blows like jabs and right straights. And he was palming Stipe's jabs and making sure that Stipe had a hard time getting his jab and his right straight through. And actually, you saw that DC was able to jab with Stipe, because what he would do is that he was essentially had his hands over Stipe's, and then he would shoot his left jab through the middle to hit Stipe. He accidentally eye poked Stipe a couple times, and actually this led to a really awkward moment where the ref, he tells DC that he can't have his hands open anymore. But the thing is that that's what made DC's defense effective, is that his hands are open, ready to palm and deflect jabs and right straights. So he closed his fist, and right away Stipe just throws a jab right up the middle. It hits DC, and DC just goes right back to palms open, ignores anything that the ref is saying. And another layer of DC's defense, he actually had two defenses against the right straight, which is how Stipe gets most of his knockouts. Daniel, whenever somebody starts throwing punches, what he likes to do is lean back and out to his right side. And what this does is that it creates the longest distance possible for the right straight, as well as takes his head offline, makes it a lot harder for his opponents to hit him. And what he was actually doing was that he was always fishing for the left collar tie or overhook. Whenever Stipe tried to come in, Stipe tried to step in on him, and what that did was the same thing for Joko Close. The left hand, because it's going over Stipe's shoulder, it's actually raising DC's shoulder, protecting him from the right straight. So the right straight is ending up hitting him on the shoulder or in the back rather than across the head. Anytime that Stipe ended up in these clinches, what DC would do was that he would try to free his right arm and start throwing the right uppercuts. That, these right uppercuts are DC's bread and butter. As soon as he gets that single collar tie, he starts throwing the uppercuts. He threw them against Alexander. He was lifting Alexander off the ground with these. He knocked out John Jones' mouthpiece with this, and now he's finally knocked out Stipe Miocic with the right uppercut. He had these three lines of defense. One was the palms out. The next one is he was doing that deep lean to the right side, as well as the single collar tie with his left hand was actually obscuring the way for Stipe's right straight. And what made John Jones so dangerous against DC was that John Jones was he loved kicking. His boxing wasn't that great, but he loved kicking. And, palms out, that doesn't really do anything against kicks. The lean against that, lean to the right side, that's what got him caught with the left high kick. But Stipe is a boxer, so he wasn't really throwing kicks, and he found himself getting caught up in the hand fight a lot, where his jabs and his right straight couldn't go through. So if he maybe changed his strategy to folding his elbows over the top of DC's hands, so he could try to land elbows, it could have been a whole different story. But at the end of the fight, the sequence kind of goes like this. They end up in the clinch. Stipe actually has the underhook on Daniel's left side. He kind of has that underhook / body lock. DC swims his left arm all the way up and around and under, grabs the underhook, hops to his left, lines up the right hand, and then boom, lands the right uppercut. Stipe drops, Daniel stands over him, finishes up with a couple punches, and then you have the second division champ in the UFC ever, Daniel Cormier. Pretty amazing stuff, and he's a really humble guy. He really did deserve it. Then what happens next is so funny. Brock Lesnar enters the case. They have WWE moment. I just thought it was so funny that Brock Lesnar, he never has a clue about what's happening in an MMA world. He's he's always to himself. He doesn't really like public attention or anything like that. His house is in the secluded part of Minnesota or something like that. And he comes in the middle of the cage, grabs the mic, says, "All these heavyweights are shit." Except for saying Zaganu, Francis Ngannou, he says Niganu. You can't, he's pronouncing the last name as you would read it without, how you read it off paper without actually pronouncing it properly. He pauses for a moment, can't remember Derek Lewis' name, skips over it, goes to Stipe shit, and then he says, "Finally, DC, I'm coming for that belt, I'm coming back." Obviously, he doesn't deserve the belt. It's probably Curtis Blades or Derek Lewis that should fight for the belt next, but obviously, Brock Lesnar, he's always going to be a really big draw, and, as long as he can get past USADA, then I guess, that's a fight that I'd watch just because of the size difference. But obviously, Cain Velasquez is a super small. He's pretty small for heavyweight. He always comes in 230 pounds. He demolished Brock Lesnar, because Brock Lesnar, if he can't get the takedown, then he's just a deer in headlights. And obviously, I don't see him being able to take down DC. So yeah, that's a fight that I guess I could watch. So that basically wrapped up UFC 225. The next card, let's see here, is UFC Fight Night 133. And that actually is looking to be a decent enough card. You got Junior Dos Santos making his return against Russian prospect Blago Ivanov. Sage Northcutt is on that versus Zach Otto. Dennis Bermudez. Chad Mendes makes his return against Miles Jury. I really like that fight. Kat Zingano is also on the card, so I like Kat Zingano. Eddie Wineland, he's really sick. I like him. Darren Elkins versus Alexander Volkanovski. Watch out for that guy, Alexander Volkanovski. He's sick. Justin Scoggins is also on the card. He's amazing. Who else? Oh, and then the cancel fight for James Vick versus Paul Felder, because Paul Felder fought already. So yeah, that was UFC 225. I'm probably gonna do a podcast like once a week type of deal. Whenever there's a fight card, whenever I can get on the podcast type of thing, just because I just like to have my voice out there. I like to talk to you guys and everything like that. So yeah, I'm gonna try to put this podcast on as many like sites as I can, like somewhere that's like YouTube, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Soundcloud. I think that's about it that I'll put it on. Let me know what you guys think about the podcast. Yeah, this is my first podcast attempt, so real sorry for the quality, but I promise that I'm gonna get better as it goes. I'm gonna actually be dropping a video this either Saturday or Sunday, make that a regular thing, and then also make a podcast episode a regular thing. Don't know what I'm gonna call this podcast, probably like PatPaj MMA podcast or something like that, or PatPaj philosophy. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah, if you have any suggestions for a podcast title, let me know. Sorry if there's like a bunch of background noise and everything like that. Everybody is home right now, and yeah, well, thank you so much for listening. Hope you liked the podcast, and I will see you soon. Peace.